Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to a new coloring adventure with CLAldridge Art. I am so happy to see you. I hope you are all having a wonderful day. This is the book that I was going to be coloring in today. It is one of my newest releases called 40 Fan Favorites. It is specifically about oops, sorry about that. Hit the autofocus there. It is a sampler book of my first 8 volumes. It has been designed to give you a taste of these particular books and help you to decide whether or not you might like to add any one or all of them to your particular library. It is a companion book, not it is in that it is a companion book in that it represents the larger versions of my drawings, and then of course many of the drawings that have and there aren't very many of them in here, but that have mandala as their sort of central feature on the inside, like this one. This is one that I did the other day, and I used some metallic watercolors that I had made, but it is companioned with the Mandalas book, which surprised me by being the most popular book that I have ever released. I did not realize that mandalas would be so popular, or I would have released this book before I did. But this is just an example of some of the things that are in this book and how we've colored them. So without further discussion, how about we get started and see what we can do. I am going to be working today with my favorite CaliArt markers, and that does mean that it is a good idea to use a plastic sheet. This is just a cutting mat, a chopping mat from the dollar store, and I cut it down and I put a little piece of washi tape on the cut edge just to make sure that it wasn't sharp, and I just stick it in behind my page, and it helps to protect the pages underneath, because no matter what, markers do bleed. I love the backside of a marker piece. I think it is just as beautiful as the front side. Well, maybe not quite, but you get the point. In this book also, and so you know, these are printed with Amazon. I do print through KDP. I also have PDF versions of all of my books, including this one, in my Etsy shop. There are links below. There are also links to the print versions of my books. Those are all Amazon affiliate links, so I do earn a small commission. This is one that I did with Derwent ink tints, and I really love the way that this one turned out. I did this one also with ink tints, and so that just sort of gives you an idea that the paper, it does crinkle, but ink tints does not really bleed through. It shadows, but it's an effect that I happen to like, and I don't care about crinkly paper. This is another one from this book, and I will tell you that this particular drawing that I picked out to do today is from my book, and here's an index here in the front. By the way, this is in there so that when you're using the look inside the book feature on Amazon, you get to see these pages, so you can see all the drawings that are in the book. This one is from my book Flowers of Fantasy, and if you look on the back, you can see that that is what the cover of Flowers of Fantasy looks like. So if you liked those 5 drawings and you wanted more of those would be right in here. And we will grab a couple of, I love these bulldog clips, and what I do is I just pin down my pages, and that helps keep the pages from getting out of place. It also helps me because I have a tendency to run my sleeve or my palm over this edge, and I bend it. So if I've got it clipped down, I don't really do that. Now, I did pick out a palette. Please pay no attention. I was doodling while I was on the phone. And I didn't realize that I was doodling on my color palette for this one. I was watching Dancing with the Stars last night, and during one of the dances, they had a beautiful light set up, and it featured these 4 colors in exactly this order as sort of roving beams of light. And it was so inspiring that I pulled the comprehensive colors. So this is the Rouge Orange in the CaliArts, which is your Y906. The Cerulean Blue, which is your B205. The Turquoise Green Light, which is your B714. The Vivid Pink, which is your R607. I've also pulled the Ocean Green, which is your G318, and the Praline Brown, which is, or praline, depending upon where you're from, is your Y648. Now, you might notice that I am very, very happy today. There is a very good reason for that. For those of you who watch my show on a regular basis, you might remember that my friend has been very, very sick, and I am pleased, just absolutely over the moon, ecstatic to say that she is home from the hospital, that she is healing, that the pathology reports are good, and that it looks like she is going to live. And I did not realize quite how serious it was. She did not tell me, and I, of course, being in somewhat of denial over my best friend of 46 years, being quite as ill as she was, and didn't ask. And so I was nonetheless, it was just so delightful to learn that she will be with us, barring the idea that any of us could get hit by a meteor tomorrow. It looks like she's going to be with us for a while yet. So, yay! We're doing the happy dance here at CLAldridge Art. I'm actually trying to, I've completely forgotten how to use my camera, apparently. There we go. That's a little bit better. Get you down there, now let me fix that focus. Oops. That's not it. Oh, wait, we almost had it. There we go. And the white balance is looking pretty good. Yep. Okay. So now at least you can see what I'm doing. This is starting out with the Rouge Orange. And I am just going to straight color this. And then we're going to do some embellishing with some fun stuff. But I do want to demonstrate that you can just straight color in these books. You don't have to be fancy. There are some beautiful renderings of these drawings, or colorings of these drawings up in various social media sites. And I do regularly feature the colorists from my Facebook group in videos. They're in a playlist called Celebrating Colorists. So if you ever need inspiration, you can get that. Also, if you visit my Facebook page, or my CLAldridge Art Facebook page, there is also an album there where you can get free samples from each of my books to color along while you're waiting for your copy to arrive, or if you just are looking for a free page to color. That's what they're there for. There's a sample page from all of the books, and in most of the albums there are two. They are individually in there, so you have to look at the individual album for that book to get the associated free page. But these colors just made me so happy, and I apologize. I am a book spinner. I will spin the book on you, so I don't want to make you dizzy, but I do spin the book, mostly so I could get a decent angle to try and stay in the lines without having to lay my head down on the side of the desk. So how are all of you? I hope that that you are having a good day, that if you are ill, that you are healing, if you are in pain, that your pain medications are working, if you are suffering in any way and coloring can bring you any relief, that is what it is all about. And that is the magic of art, to let us forget our troubles for a while and just color. And make something pretty. I started my week yesterday, Monday. Well, my week starts on Sunday when I stream, and I streamed and we did a book review of the coloring book of Wuthering Heights, which is fabulous. So if you haven't seen that, I actually will tell you the entire novel as I'm flipping through it. It was, I think it was fun. It took an hour to tell the story, or at least as much of it is represented by the coloring pages in the book. And I'm not worrying that I'm getting a little bit out of the lines, because I've got a darker shade that I'm going to, or even a gold or something opaque that I can go over those flubs with. The point is that you cannot mess it up. If you are coloring in a book, you cannot mess my books up. You just color and have fun, and I don't expect masterpieces, and so don't put pressure on yourself, okay? I make coloring books and draw coloring books for you to be able to get a guaranteed pretty result just by putting color on the page. And that is why I think my books are extraordinary. Because I have seen people that are, that just very lightly color with pastels, and those that, just really go to town with beautiful blending and shading. And to me, they are all equally as beautiful, because it's you who took the time to actually color my work. And that is amazing to me. Okay, so now I've used the rouge yellow. I do want to get a little bit of color balance, or the rouge orange. So I want to choose something else to put the orange on. I don't have to choose that right away, but I think that at bare minimum, I will choose these or because I've taken that to the outside and now I've got a little bit of it on the inside. I also am probably going to want to add it a little bit more, but I'm going to leave the jury sort of out on where I'm going to use that color. Okay, so now something that I know is going to be, and that's how I oftentimes will start. If I don't quite know where to go next with my color, I'll start with something that I know is going to be. So the green is going to go on the leaves. So I might as well do the leaves. Because I am a bit of a traditionalist that way. Although, if you want to make brown leaves, you can make brown leaves. I did that in my last video. I did a very odd color palette, and I'll show it to you. I did this was an interesting color palette too. This is a Prismacolor palette, and isn't it pretty? This is a work in progress. I still haven't finished it, but there it is. This was just a very odd color palette, but look at it, worked really beautifully, and I just could not have been more happy with the way that this turned out, and then used some gel pen to zhuzh it up just a little. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. You're back down. And I don't even remember what I was talking about. What was I talking about? Oh, Wuthering Heights, yes. We did a little coloring, and then I went over and visited with a couple of other streamers. On Sunday, the schedule is pretty full, so. I also did see that my friend Anne over at A Colorful Life is having a bit of computer difficulty. So I am wishing that she will be able to get some content up via phone. But I thought maybe that if some of her watchers wanted some nice content, they could also watch over here. And I'm not nearly as entertaining as Anne. She's got a lot of stuff going on as far as wonderful. She's doing scrapbooking and journaling, actually, and making ephemera pieces and all of that kind of stuff for that. I am trying to draw for my next book, which I want to release before Christmas. But I needed a break from doing that, so I thought I would just pop on and make a nice little video for you guys. And say hi, how you doing? Oh my gosh, guys, welcome back. I am so sorry. I had pushed pause or not pause, but I'd ended that little part of the video. I went to, as I was coloring these green leaves, I went to heat up my coffee, and it came back, and I was coloring along and talking, and all of a sudden I looked up and realized that I had failed to hit record. And so I don't know why my brain was thinking, I guess that this was a live stream and that it was just going to continue on. And so I apologize that you missed all of this part, but I colored the leaves green, and then I've also colored the little curlicues, and I just noticed that this one here does not have a curlicue in it, so I was going to add that, and I looked up and saw that I wasn't recording, and I went, oh well. silly me. And so let me find the right drawing pen. If I can find a right drawing pen. I want a number 5 because that's what I drew it with, and all of that for just a little C. Just like that. And so I apologize because, well, you can at least see as far as I've gotten. So I will zoom back in and just continue on, and we'll pretend that that didn't happen. Pause the video and catch up if you are coloring along, and we will go from there. Now, where was I? I think I had been talking about Anne and her ephemera, and boy, I tell you what, I can really sympathize with her. She was having some computer issues, and I know what that's like, and I say, as I have a computer sitting on my desk now that will do video editing, it's really hard on our laptops if we do edit videos. So many people stream because they can avoid the editing and rendering process that way. But if you are like me and you like to add a little introduction and be able to put in little graphics, computer graphics, and things like that, you have to learn to use a video editor, and that can be very taxing on a computer system. So, Anne, my hope is that you are back up and running before you even have a chance to miss making content. So, and I'm sure that she will be, and will be making content again very, very soon. In the meantime, I'm happy to take up that mantle at least a little bit, maybe fill in that space, and show you my coloring books and hopefully interest you in coloring in them as well. Hello everybody, and I've now switched over to voiceover on this video. As I was coloring along, I was trying to think of something interesting to talk about, and I found that I was casting about so much that I ummed myself right into numbness and couldn't really talk about anything. So I went ahead and continued to color, and then I set about trying to find an easier way to do a voiceover of a video than the way that I was doing it. I love my Linux-based free software programs, and I film using a program called OBS, which is Open Broadcast Studio. It lets me do a lot of things that I used to be able to do on my laptop, but I have not yet transferred over to this new computer. But a lot of things with graphics and stuff like that. So I really love it. But it didn't allow me a way to pause the video while I was doing a voiceover. So this is an especially long video, and that got to be a problem. So I had to look for a better way to do it, something that would allow me to take a quick break if I needed to. And so I did a little search on Google, and I came up with a program called Audacity, Audacity, and it is available from audacity.org. It is also a free Linux-based software, and it's really cool, I gotta say. Very intuitive, easy to use, a quick download, and performs really nicely. It lets you do voiceovers. You can pause the sound, you can pause the video, the video plays in the video editor, and the Audacity is a separate program, and then you put the two together. But this is one of the reasons why it is so important that if you're going to do pre-recorded videos, that you equip yourself with good equipment to do it, because all of this stuff really is, it's all high def, and it's all, our little laptops in their cabinets are not really made for it, and that really has to do, you want a lesson in computers? I might as well. I learned it, so maybe you guys will be interested in it. But apparently, laptop computers, of course, are designed to be light and small, and so they don't have an awful lot of room inside the cases. And video editing especially causes a CPU to work very hard, and that is the part of a computer that makes your fans kick on. So if you've got a laptop and you're constantly hearing your fans coming on, that's because whatever you are doing is causing the CPU to work very hard. And those fans inside the case are to keep the motherboard, which is your CPU, cool. They used to keep computers in refrigerated rooms, and that's the reason why, because the heat is hard on the electronics. So now you know. So audacity.com or audacity.org, and it's for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and I think I love this program. Anyway, on to something a little more coloring related, or more interesting anyway. I did manage to come up with a topic that always floats my boat, and that is a book. I had such a ball on Sunday telling you about Wuthering Heights that I thought today I might talk a little bit about Jane Eyre. For those who, of course, have read Jane Eyre, it is a classic novel. It was written by Charlotte Bronte, and I have just been really fascinated by the Bronte sisters. What are the odds that three sisters from the same family would literally become best-selling, in their day and age, best-selling authors, and have their books live from the 1800s, when they were originally published, to now, and be thought of as classics. It just goes to show, I think, the privately educated, because they were pretty much all educated at home, and ultimately, well, actually, that's not really true. All four of the Bronte children were trained to be tutors, or in the case of the women, they were governesses. So, sorry, I paused for a second, and I had a little pause malfunction, so I apologize for that little silent spot. So I think I was talking about it at this point in time. He's still pretty horrible, but it doesn't go unnoticed by the housekeeper that he has stayed home this time longer than he has in a lot of for quite some time, and he seems to really be enjoying taking part in teaching the lessons, the botany lessons and things like that with Adele, and he's sort of surprised at the improvement in Adele, in her willingness to learn, and I mean, he still sort of views her, and he even says this, which is so mean to a child. He says that basically she's just sort of vain and frippery, and just loves nothing more than new dolls and pretty clothes and things like that, and she hasn't got a brain and all of this kind of stuff. And that really sort of sets Jane's teeth on edge, because Jane, believes that children sort of are the product of how they are raised, and that if you treat a child badly, you're doing a lot of damage, and that she believes that all children are worthy of love, and that's that sort of is the central theme um, in this particular book, is the worthiness of love. And of course, Jane has had that love. Her parents loved her, and then her aunt and uncle, her uncle loved her, and then the people who said that they would love her didn't. She was the doctor tried to do her a kindness, and it turned into a cruelty. She gave her heart to a friend, and the friend abandoned her. So, all of these are central themes that are playing out within Jane's mind as it's going along. But now, at this point in time, of course, Rochester tells Jane about how he came to be Adele's guardian in the first place. He, as a young man, enjoyed the pleasures of a young man, and was visiting Paris and fancied himself in love with a young woman. I don't remember her name. But as it turns out, she was basically using him for his wealth, because he was, of course, a wealthy young man. And so she was after his money. And when he found out about it, and basically broke off with her, she left in his care a baby. And that baby was Adele. So he saw to her schooling up until the point where she couldn't stay wherever it was that she was anymore. And then he brought her home to Thornfield to care for her there, even though she was not his child. So that's how he came to be Adele's ward. And I think, my memory is a little fuzzy on this, I think the mother at some point in time dies or runs away with somebody. Anyway, she basically is gone from Adele's life forever. And she never reappears in the novel at all. After he's been home for some time, of course, there have been strange things going on in the house. People, there'll be this mysterious laughing, and one night somebody comes and rattles her doorknob, and she has been advised by Mr. Rochester to please lock her doors at night, that kind of thing. And yet there isn't supposed to be anybody else living in the house. Mrs. Poole, of course, is the mystery, and but other than that, everybody else, should be safe, but that isn't, always the case. And then one night there is Jane wakes to hear a strange cackling sound, a laughing sound, and she smells smoke. And when she goes to investigate, she finds Mr. Rochester's room on fire, with him asleep in the bed. And so she, runs in and grabs, the water from the wash basin, and throws it on him to wake him up. And together they fight this fire, and they manage to get it out. It's what's happened apparently is a candle has set the curtains around his bed on fire, and only it seems pretty strange that would have happened. And so Mr. Rochester leaves Jane alone in his room, all wrapped up. He thanks her very much for saving his life, and then he goes to, he tells her to please stay right there until he gets back. And so he leaves for a while, and when he comes back, he thanks her much more tenderly than is probably appropriate. And that stirs feelings in Jane, and that sort of both thrills her and horrifies her, because he is her boss, and you're always told you can't get above your station and that kind of thing. Not that that's what's going on in her head. I mean, she's basically thrilled, and no one has ever looked at her the way that he looked at her that night. And she's absolutely thrilled. Now, at this point in time, I should say that, and especially this is emphasized in the book, Jane is very plain. She is not a beautiful woman. She is, she wears her hair in a very severe manner. She dresses in drab colors. She basically does everything in the world not to call attention to herself. So that in the movie, the way that they portray it, and actually in the book too, for the very first time, she puts on a red ribbon or a collar, and she ties a bow around her neck, basically, and goes down to breakfast, only to discover that Mr. Rochester has gone, and there is no word about when he'll come back. And of course, Jane is so disappointed, and but there really isn't anything that she can do. So she cries her tears, and then she just, everything just goes back to the routine of teaching Adele and writing her letters to the people that she writes. She writes to Bessie, who was the only person when she lived with Mr. and Mrs. Reed that was nice to her, and Bessie was a maid. So she does keep up a correspondence with Bessie, and lets her know the major happenings of her life, that kind of thing. So one day, Mrs. Fairfax, who is the housekeeper at Thornfield Hall, is all a twitter. Jane comes back in from a walk, and she's all a twitter because the master has written that he's coming home again, and this time he's bringing a house party with him. So, he's going to be bringing a ton of guests, and they're supposed to have all this food prepared and all of that. So everybody in the house, including Jane, sets about, making sure that all the silver is polished and all the windows shine and all the, all of the anything that's supposed to be, the woodwork is shiny, the food pantries are all full, that kind of thing. And Rochester descends on the house with a ton of people in tow. Among them is a very beautiful woman, young woman, and I believe her sisters, or her sister is also, or there's twins. Oh, that's it. So there's the young woman and her mother, and then there's a set of twins. There is an anthropologist man who is studying twins, and there's a bunch of other people that all arrive. And so for the next several weeks, all of these people are going to be living in the house. Now Jane, of course, goes full on bird mode again. Don't notice me. Let me sit in the corner. And Rochester just insists that she come and be part of everything that is going on. I should take a little break here and tell you what I'm telling you why I've decided to make this part of this drawing brown. Now, this is up to now, of course, I've just been coloring flowers and putting in color. And so this is a rather bold move, and I did hesitate in my coloring before I made this decision or choice to do this. And then once I was in, I was sort of in. I was stuck with it. And I don't know if I colored this again, if I would do it the same way, but I ultimately do end up happy with the result on this. So this color, by the way, is praline, and it's a very dark caramely brown, and I ultimately love it. I love the way that it looks. And what I was looking to do is tone down how bright it was becoming. When I used that hot, vivid pink and the rouge orange, in the way that I did with the cool colors, I was in danger of getting garish. And so I wanted to try and avoid garish by finding a way to tone those colors down. So that's why I decided on this dark brown. Okay, so back to the house party with Mr. Rochester. Now, he has insisted that Jane come, and of course, Adele is just thrilled because she gets to come too, but only, for very short periods of time. Now, I will say that Adele is a very, she acquits herself well, but she is a little girl and really has no business being at a house party, and is obnoxious in the way that little kids are. She wants the sweets and so all of that. So Jane is trying to do her very best to instruct Adele in decorum. And Rochester invites Jane one evening to have a conversation, and the conversation turns to nature versus nurture. And the mother of the beautiful woman who is theoretically, being courted by Rochester. This is all supposed to be a get to know you because he's being pressured to get an heir because he is the sole person, and there's nobody to leave his household to in the event that something happens to him. So in order to hang on to what he has, he needs an heir. And so the woman that is there is supposedly who he's going to marry. At least that's what Jane believes. And so it's her mother that is particularly snobbish and says some really kind of nasty things about bad blood. If a child has bad blood, then they're going to be bad. Meaning, of course, that they are from a family that is, like tradesmen. If you're a butcher's daughter, you've got bad blood and you're destined to, be bad, kind of thing. And she maintains the position that children have no more emotion or feeling than do dogs. And of course, any of us who's ever had a dog know that, of course, our dogs have feelings, and as do children. And so Jane argues the point, and Rochester, of course, is watching her, and you don't actually get the idea. You do in the movie, but you don't necessarily in the book, because you never hear his point of view. You only hear Jane's in the book. But he basically approves that, that Jane is sticking up for herself and her position. So the next day, everybody is scheduled to go riding, and Jane doesn't ride. But Rochester insists that she come along anyway. She does eventually find a way out of it, but that is because she gets a letter from Bessie that her aunt, Sarah Reed, is ill and wishes to see her. She's dying. And so Jane asks Mr. Rochester for leave, and he grants it. Now, of course, he hasn't paid her. Now, she gets £30 per year is the wages for what she does for Adele, and she has not worked yet for the six months, which she supposedly gets £15 every 6 months, and it's only been about 60 days. So he offers her 50 pounds to take with her. And she, absolutely says no. Not only is that more than I've earned, but it's no. So he says, will you take 10? And, she says, yes, she will. And he said, it's good that I don't give it all to you, the entire 15 pounds that I guess she'd been there 3 months, that's it, or 6 months. The entire 15 pounds, because that way you have a reason to come back. And she says, yes, you still owe me 5 pounds. So she leaves the house party and she travels back to where her aunt lives. Now, of course, this is a woman that was completely unkind to her. And why she feels she owes this woman something is something that Mr. Rochester argues before she leaves. Because she's been told, or, they know each other well enough now to where he knows her background and, and the fact that she was raised by this horrible aunt kind of thing. But it's the kind of person that Jane is. She doesn't hold grudges. She gives people a second chance, and so she goes because she's supposed to, and her aunt is her family and her only living family, and so she goes. And the aunt doesn't apologize for the wrong that she has done Jane in the past, but she does give Jane a letter that arrived shortly after she kicked Jane out years earlier, and that she had she'd withheld from her. And in the letter, it is an uncle on Jane's father's side. Now, her father was the poor curate. Her mother was the rich relation that had run, the Mr. Reed's sister, and Mr. Reed was rich. The mother had run off with a poor curate, and so she had been basically disowned by the family, and that's why everybody was so hesitant to take Jane in. But apparently there is this uncle, and he wants to adopt her. He wanted to adopt her because he had no other relatives, and he had made a fortune in the islands somewhere, wherever, whether that was the British Islands or he had a fortune that he made somewhere, and he wanted to leave it to Jane, and Mrs. Reed had told him that Jane was dead. And so she herself was dying. Mrs. Reed is dying because her son, the one that used to beat Jane up, has basically gambled away the entire fortune, left her destitute, holding all of his debt, and it's just been emotionally too much for her, and she's ill, and so she dies. And this is where we first get to meet her two cousins, Eliza, and they're not really important. But one, life with their mother has, one of them is a nun, basically, or it is going to be a nun, and the other one is basically just a fluffy bit of a girl that relies on the attention of men to validate her self-worth, and that is ultimately who they are and who they become. So after the funeral, Jane heads back to Thornfield, and Mr. Rochester and she have a long conversation about about the the aunt and how she's forgiven her, and all of that. And of course, the house party is still going on. So But Rochester is absolutely delighted to see her, and ultimately, uh, he's just you could tell by his reaction that he is starting to have. It looks like he's starting to have feelings for her, which she can't possibly believe because uh, because he's Mr. Rochester and he's going to marry this rich woman, and so she doesn't believe any of that stuff. Well, right about then, at least I think I've got that part right. Right about then, a mystery fellow sort of arrives. Oh, I know it. Now I know what it is. Okay. So, as part of the entertainment, that's it. As part of the entertainment that Rochester is providing to these people at his house party, he decides to have a seance. And he invites like a gypsy woman, and she comes to tell everybody's fortune. Now, Rochester, at this point in time, this is how we know that he is becoming interested in Jane, because he actually uses this woman to try and find out how Jane feels about him. And that's what he's trying to find out with this whole sort of house party exercise. By now, Rochester has realized that he's in love with Jane, and he's trying to find out how Jane feels about him. And ultimately, Jane, of course, calls him out on it. She basically calls him out on it. She's perfectly willing to be his friend, but there is nothing more that she can do for him because, of course, he's destined to marry this other woman, and that is how she views things. And so he isn't, he of course can't communicate to her that he really has no interest at all in this other woman. He's just basically using her to try and figure out how Jane feels about him. But during that whole thing, a mystery guest arrives, and the mystery guest is, let me see, I do have a copy of the plot just to refresh my memory. Oh, the woman that he's supposed to be marrying is Blanche Ingram. That's, yeah. And, yeah, Rochester baits Jane by saying how much he will miss her after getting married and how she will soon forget him. Oh, that's it. Okay. All right, but we can't go there just yet. Is that? Oh, yeah, okay. The mystery guest that arrives is Mr. Mason. That's right. Okay. So Mr. Mason arrives, and as Rochester is talking to Jane, Jane has busted him on the gypsy woman and why she's there. And as he's having that conversation with her and telling her that, if he were lost on a desert island and she were the only, if he, oh, I know what it is. He's, at this point in time, he started to reveal that he has this horrible dark secret. And he wants to tell Jane what it is, but he says that, Jane, if I were the most horrible man in the world, would you still want to be with him? And Jane declares that she would be his friend regardless. And so that is what that's all about. That's when he gets notified that Mr. Mason has come. And he, goes into a blue panic. And so, he puts on a happy face and he goes and greets Mr. Mason, who is sitting in the living room. and puts him up for the night. And then in the middle of, everybody goes to bed, right? In the middle of the night, there's this horrible scream. And, Jane comes out, lights a candle, comes out of her room. Everybody is, coming out of their rooms with their lit candles, trying to figure out what's going on. And Mr. Rochester is standing there telling everybody that everything is all right. And but when Jane looks down at the floor, she sees that there is a pool of blood dripping from, the blood dripping from his hand. And so she quickly rushes to drop her handkerchief or her kerchief over the blood and wipes it up before anybody notices, and then goes back into her room and waits, because she knows that, I don't know how she knows, but she knows that Rochester needs her help. And Mr. Rochester comes and gets her and takes her into the part of the house where Mrs. Poole lives. And he tells her that no matter what she sees or hears, that she has to keep pressure on this particular wound. Mr. Mason is laying on a sofa. He unlocks the door. Mason is laying on a sofa, and Jane has to keep pressure on the wound. Rochester has to go right for the doctor, and no matter what she hears, she is to keep pressure on the room. In the meantime, there's something fighting to get out of a locked door, banging against the door. And she, all she hears is this sort of growling sound. And she's terribly frightened, and he rushes for the doctor and arrives back, and she does exactly what she's been told. She, calms Mason. She tells him that everything will be all right, and doesn't ask him any questions. She doesn't do any of that because Rochester told her not to. And she's, so this is all a mystery. So eventually the doctor gets there, and he treats Mason, and Rochester and Anne get Mason into a carriage and get him out of there on his way to the doctor's house. And by now the sun is coming up. And he offers no explanations at all, and just simply asks her to walk with him. And, so they're sort of walking in silence. And now, at this point in time, it should be noted that Jane is in love with Rochester. I mean, and the only thing, of course, that keeps her from declaring that to him is that she believes herself to be, far too plain. Blanche Ingram is a much more suitable wife for his station, and basically Jane pretty much doesn't believe that she has a chance at all. But given the happenings of the house party, and the sort of mysterious Mr. Mason arriving, things break up pretty quickly, and everybody goes on their way. And that leaves Jane and Rochester once again there in the house. And, we already know that Rochester is in love with her, or at least, we strongly suspect that he is. And so one night they go for their nightly walk, and as they are talking, he says to her how much he will miss her after he is married, because she will have to go somewhere else. Obviously, they're going to send Adele off to school somewhere, and Jane will have to find employment elsewhere. But he says that he will find her a job, and for her not to worry, because she will forget him soon enough, and and that she'll have a happy life. And it's at this point in time that Jane can't stand it 1 second longer, because Blanche Ingram is heartless, and she may be talented, she may be beautiful, but she is just not good enough for Mr. Rochester in Jane's eyes, and Jane, in sort of a just a mad declaration, basically says, if she were beautiful, and if she were as talented, that she would declare her love for him, and make it as hard for him to leave her as it sounds like it is easy for him to send her away. And at that point in time, Rochester now has his answer, because he's been trying to find out how Jane feels about him, and now she's just declared it. So he declares that he is in fact in love with her and proposes marriage. And she, of course, just cannot possibly believe that he is serious. But he manages to convince her. And so they set about, making plans to get married, which, of course, in those days took a while. And in the movie version, I don't know if this happens in the book. I can't remember if it does. But there's a shopping trip in the movie where he's got this carriage that he ordered for Blanche, and it's one of these that's padded, and it's white, and it's all delicately decorated and all of that. And Jane takes one look at it and goes and gets in the black carriage, which is, the plain carriage. And so they head off to town, and he's ordering her dresses. And she's telling the shopkeepers, no, she doesn't need all these dresses. She needs like 3 dresses. Well, she needs 3 dress-up dresses and 3 daytime dresses. And, so here he is trying to lavish her with jewelry and clothing and hats and all of this kind of stuff, and she's telling the shopkeepers, no, I want this one and that one, and this hat will do, and basically just thwarting his trying to spoil her. And it's a very happy time. It's the happiest time, obviously, in her life. The housekeeper is completely skeptical. Of course, the housekeeper knows the secret. And so Jane writes to her uncle. She has decided to start a correspondence with her uncle, who had thought that she was dead. And so she tells him the happy news. And so the morning of their wedding comes, and Jane is dressed, and everybody says that she's just absolutely beautiful. And of course, Jane has never felt beautiful in her life. And so they go off to the church to get married, and just as the curate, says, are there any here who can show just cause why these two cannot be legally joined in wedlock? Who walks in the door but Mason, Mr. Mason? And he says, yeah, I can show just cause. Rochester is already married to my sister. Dramatic pause, Oh my goodness. So we come to find out that, as Rochester is trying to explain, he says, let me show you my wife. And so everybody goes trooping back to Thornfield. The, curate, the mason, all of the guests, basically. And Rochester opens the door and reveals Bertha, his wife, who has been cared for by Grace Poole. That's who Grace is. Grace is Bertha's nurse. And apparently Grace drinks. And it's when Grace drinks that Bertha escapes the room and caused the fire. And actually, one of the other things that she did was Jane woke up one morning to find her wedding veil torn into pieces. Um, and this was all Bertha who did this. Now, Bertha is in fact Rochester's wife. She's mad. She's crazy. And he was tricked into marrying her by his father because he was a second son. And his father wanted to increase his wealth, not Rochester's wealth, but the dad's wealth. And so he tricked his son into marrying this woman. She was exotic. She was from, I guess, all of these. At this point in time, most of the landed gentry had business interests in the Indies, the West Indies. Yeah, that's right, the West Indies, and that's where Bertha is from. And Mason is her brother, and he allowed the marriage to go ahead, even though he knew that his sister was slowly going into hereditary or congenital madness. Her mother was crazy, and so it runs in the family. And I guess today we would probably call it schizophrenia. However, Bertha, is she's completely mad. There's no way she could be a wife or anything like that. And he could have abandoned her. He could have, housed her somewhere else. He owns many houses at this point. He could, but instead he kept her at Thornfield Hall and hired Grace to take care of her. And he was really just sort of, looking for a way out of that and hoping to. He knew he was doing wrong by offering to marry Jane, but he wanted her anyway. And so, needless to say, they don't get married. But Rochester does try to convince Jane to move with him to the south of France to live as husband and wife, where people don't know them. They could, say that they were married, and her Christian values won't allow her to do that. And she is quite obviously upset, and so she ends up running away in the middle of the night. And what few belongings she has, she ends up leaving on a coach because she's so desolate at a coach stop. So now she's stuck on the moors with no money. There's a place where you have to change coaches out on the moors in the north of England. And she gets out of one coach, but she leaves her bags and everything behind on the seat. So she's got nothing. She's already distraught. So she wanders the moors until she basically collapses on the doorstep of a house that, because she looks like a mad woman herself, they won't let her in. And the man who lives in the house is also a curate. There's a lot of curates apparently in the north of England. And he takes pity on her and brings her in the house, and of course chastises his cousins or his sisters for not letting her in the first place. And basically they nurse her back to health. And Jane claims that she has no idea who she is, although she does, but she wants a fresh start because obviously being Jane Eyre has not been working for her. So, excuse me. So as it, whoops, hang on. Sorry about that, everybody. I had to stop and have a bit of a coughing attack. So anyway, Jane is very obviously grieving the loss of Mr. Rochester and Thornfield and Alice and Adele and people that she's come to think of as family and the only home that she's ever really known. And so, she is very, very hesitant to claim who she is, and especially if by any chance Rochester is actually out looking for her. She doesn't want him to find her. And so she's hiding. And now the two women's names, what are their names? They are, hang on just a second. Diana and Mary Rivers. That's it. And their brother's name, the curate, their brother's name is St. John, which is actually we would say it's St. John. Americans would say it's St. John, but apparently in England it's pronounced St. John. And he's a clergyman. And so he doesn't, he doesn't immediately embrace the idea of Jane. But Mary and Diana kind of treat her like a doll that they found out in the moors. And she's obviously well educated. Her clothing is in good repair, but she's a mystery for them to solve, and they're trying to solve it. In the meantime, because of her refusal to say who she is or remember her name, St. John is very reluctant to have anything at all to do with her. But because she is so well educated, and he is in need of a teacher for the girls of the community. He's got an instructor for the boys, but he needs a school teacher for the girls. And so he finds a space and hires Jane to be the teacher of all of these girls. And she's supposed to teach them things like reading, sewing, needlecraft, and cooking. I think, or maybe those. Maybe it's just needlecraft, and anyway, nothing is really expected of girls. And of course, Jane, agrees to take the job, but only if she's allowed to teach the girls how she wants to teach them. And basically, she wants to teach them to read and write and do arithmetic and science and botany and all of the kinds of things that she's been trained in and that she wants to teach and pass on to others. Basically, empower girls is what she wants to do. And he reluctantly agrees. And he's one of those fuss budgets that, everything is on a time schedule. You have 7 minutes to do this and 2 minutes to do that and 12 minutes to do this and, that kind of thing. So he, everything goes along, kind of peachy keen. And he's starting to look at Jane a little bit differently as he watches her work and sees how good she is with the kids and sees the results that she's getting with these students. And so he starts to think, because what he wants to go do eventually is the same kind of work that Jane's parents did, and that's be a missionary. He wants to go to, basically to Africa and be a missionary. And but he needs a wife. Now, the woman that he's in love with, and I don't remember, hang on, let me see if I can find out her name. No, doesn't say here. Yeah, it doesn't say I'm looking on Wikipedia to see if it says what his uh, he's in love with a girl, um, but he knows that she will not make him a good curate's wife or a good missionary's wife. So he denies himself that love because he wants to be a missionary. It's what he's wanted all his life. So he settles on Jane, and eventually he asks Jane to marry him. And Jane reluctantly agrees that she will marry, but she knows that she doesn't love St. John, and she knows that she never will. Now, in the meantime, of course, St. John is out there trying to find out who this mystery woman is, especially before he actually, well, he didn't actually ask her to marry him until he found out who she was. And the way that he found out is apparently his uncle died. And the mysterious Jane Eyre was his heir. And so they'd been to Thornfield Hall looking for Jane Eyre and had been told that she had left, but that nobody knew where she had gone. And then, of course, the coach had, reported the last place that they'd left her off. St. John put two and two together and figured that this was actually the missing Jane Eyre. And so he confronts her with that, and she then admits that it's true. Well, then, as it turns out, they're actually cousins because his mother was her father's sister, or her brother's, no, her mother, no. His mother was her father's sister or something like that. At any rate, the rich uncle, the rich uncle, he left all the money to Jane. He died and he left all the money to Jane. Well, now Jane didn't think that that was fair because he obviously had nieces and nephews. St. John and Mary and Diana were also his nieces and nephews. So she inherits the sum of £20,000, which in today's money, or actually 2018 money, would be, according to Wikipedia, it's $1.7 million. That's a lot of money. So she immediately insists on dividing it 4 ways, so that they each get £5,000. And she will hear not, she won't. She actually makes it a condition of her marrying St. John that they have to accept the money, each of the, her cousins and him. And so she prepares to marry him. And one night she is out, walking on the moors, and she hears Mr. Rochester call her over destiny, shall we say. She just hears him in her heart. She hears him cry out for her. And without giving it any thought at all, she simply leaves and returns to Thornfield Hall. She basically tells St. John she cannot marry him, and she goes back. Only when she gets there, Thornfield Hall has burned to the ground. And nobody lives there. And Jane is absolutely devastated because, Thornfield Hall is gone. And one of the townspeople tells her that one night, 6 months earlier, there had been a fire, and that the wife of Rochester had died, and that Rochester had been uh, badly injured, and they didn't have any idea where he had gone. Hang on just a boy. Certainly lots of YouTube notices. Hang on. I don't know if you can hear those going ding dong or not, but it's like all the notices from YouTube are coming through at the same time. So Jane had known, because one of the things that Rochester had said was that he had this other house out in the country, and it was a rather forbidding place. But Jane gets directions and she goes out there. And sure enough, she hears the front door open as she's walking up. And she looks and she's about to call out to Rochester, but it's very obvious he's in distress. He's using a stick to not only to walk, but to be able to feel in front of him if there's anything. And she realizes that he's blind and that he can't actually see her. And she's just sort of frozen there in place. And so he calls out to ask who's there, and she doesn't answer. And so he goes back inside, and she goes around to the back door. Now, apparently, somebody, I think it's one of the old servants. I don't think it's Alice Fairfax. I think Alice is gone. I think it's one of the old like yards or groundskeepers, something like that from the old house, is there as his manservant. And he lets her in, and she, without saying anything, goes in to take him his tea. And she's shaking so hard that the teacups rattle on the tray. And he somehow senses it's her. And she, because he needs help. His hands are bandaged, and he needs help to drink water. Yet she actually has to feed him. And he reaches up and basically touches her hand, and he says, "I know whose fingers these are," At any rate, he's obviously delighted to see her, but now, of course, he feels that he's hideous and that there'd be no way at all that she could love him. But, of course, we know that that isn't true. And so eventually they do, in fact, get married and go on to, he recovers a little bit of his sight, and certainly, is able to get on in the world. Actually, I think in the book, he does recover his sight. The blindness is only temporary. And they, of course, rebuild a house, not where Thornfield stood, but another house, and go on to have children and a happy life. And that is basically the end. Oh, and Adele comes to live with them. Comes back from school where he's had to send her because, he doesn't want her to see him like that. And so with Jane's help, he rebuilds a happy life. And so it is one of the novels that does have a very happy ending. And that's really it. It's about the adventure. Now, they do spend an awful lot more time on the St. John connection and all of that. And but pretty much it's since she never really marries him, he never does, by the way, come clean about the fact that, or to the girl that he loves, and he goes off to. They do deal with that in the book. St. John eventually goes off to Africa to be a missionary, and of course promptly gets a fever and dies. So good thing she didn't go with him. Fate kept her home and gave her her own happy ending with the man that she loves. And I, of course, love that. Here, back to what I'm actually doing. Didn't think I'd be done quite that soon with that. I have decided that I needed, when I brought the cream color in as the secondary color there, I decided it was too light and I wanted it to be slightly darker, a little more brown. But there wasn't really the color that I wanted or the color that I imagined in the CaliArt set. But this is the yellow ochre and it works really well. It is coming out like a light caramel to match the dark caramel. And once again, I think if I had this particular color palette to do over again, I don't think I'd change it. I think that it has really grown on me. The more I am looking at the finished one, which you can't see yet, the more I actually like it, especially once it's got all of the embellishing on it. So you'll have to stick around to definitely see that because finished, it is actually just gorgeous. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about this whole video editing thing. And I will tell you that the making of this particular video has really been a learning curve. I am a firm believer that if you want to learn to use software, use it. Make something with it. As I have made this, I've been editing the video, and so I do have a little bit of a tip for anybody if you are a content creator or if you create videos for something. Be sure to edit the video first and then, or the footage first, and then do your voiceover. And here is why. There are several points, you can't see them anymore as a viewer right now, where I actually was pausing, because remember that I originally made this video with sound. I talked all the way through it. But at least I think even up to this point, I was still talking. At some point in time, I decided that I was going to do a voiceover and I just stopped talking. But at this point, I am still talking. And so I'll get to talking about something and I won't color for, 3 or 4 minutes. And when you do a voiceover, if you're going to add voiceover instead of the audio, you need to get rid of all of those huge pauses in the action of coloring. So I had forgotten to do that when I laid the first, just say, 35, 40 minutes of this audio down. And so I ended up having to go back in and sort of double edit. I had to, because if you don't, otherwise it throws the timeline off if you talk about what you're coloring in the voiceover. So if I wanted to talk about the specific brown that I was using or the something like that, and you hadn't edited your raw footage first, and you cut out part of your raw footage, then where you're talking about the colors is going to be in the wrong spot on your video. Then you have to go in and edit that. So save yourself the double editing. But that said, you can also drop in, just make a quick audio clip and drop it in anywhere you need to. You can, in other words, your sound is as editable as your video is. So that is actually very, very cool. So I'm still with this dark brown. And this picture is just getting steadily darker as we go. And I, at this particular point in time, I very nearly sort of canned this whole project in the coloring. And but I'm glad that I stuck it out because ultimately, I do, like I say, I really do like the result. It's a different color palette, I think, than a lot of people would have used. But in the end, it made me very happy. So I'll stop talking about the color palette now and think of something else to talk about. Uh, Hang on just a second while I dream something up. Oh, what the heck. I'm going to go back to Jane Eyre for just a second. Um, One of the things that I find most interesting is that here's this woman who thinks of herself as plain and with nothing to offer, and she has not one, but two proposals, and both for the same reason, for the person that she is, not the way that she looks. You know, St. John wants to marry her because she is a strong and capable and would make a good curate's wife, a good missionary's wife. And Rochester wants to marry her because she's sensible and practical and down to earth and not, all of the fanciness and fluff that has let him down before in both his relationship with Adele's mother and with, the woman that he was tricked into marrying. Who wouldn't want a genuine person? And that, I think, is the key to all attraction. And why would men be any different? It pretty only works for a while, but eventually it wears off, and then you actually have to have something to to go on with. And I think that it is really telling that that all of the characters in, especially in Charlotte Bronte's books, are the same thing. Because in her book, The Professor, uh, he fell in love with Charlotte for the same reasons. Not because she was the most beautiful, but because she was bright and capable and curious uh, and he enjoyed teaching her. He enjoyed teaching her about life and about love and all of those things. The fact that he was married, of course, was, and she would have nothing to do with really getting him. But she could be in love with him, which she was, but she never, they never acted on that, I guess is what I'm saying. For the same reason that Jane never did, because it would never be right for her and Rochester to be together, A, because he was married, and B, because, even though they could go to the south of France and maybe get away with it, it would not be right in God's eyes, she believed. Now, I have always said that, while I am not myself a religious person, I do, know the difference between right and wrong, and getting involved with married people is just wrong. It's just wrong on every level, uh, because it's got nothing but pain and heartbreak, and there's just nowhere to go with it. Uh, the instance where the fellow actually leaves the wife or the wife actually leaves the husband, those are, and her kids behind, kind of thing. Those are few and far between, and the exception rather than the rule. So having an affair, I've known several people who've had them throughout my lifetime, and it just never ends well. It just never goes, never goes the way that you wanted to. I had a very good friend who she and had been involved with a man for years, and they had a daughter together, and it just was, it was never a good, it was never a good relationship for either one of them, I don't think. And it did a lot of damage ultimately as well, because those things never stay secret forever. Eventually, especially when there's a kid involved, somebody's going to figure it out. But ultimately, I do believe that the fellow is still married to the woman that he was married to, and she, my other friend, of course, once he was out of her life, she found a wonderful husband. They've been married for 30 something years now. So, and have grown kids and grandkids and all of that kind of stuff together. So eventually it all came out in the wash, but nonetheless it was pretty hairy there for a few years for everybody involved. But I love the themes of books, and I think that's why I find I'm really comfortable talking about the themes of different books. You've heard me say it before that Atlas Shrugged is my absolute favorite novel of all time, and that was written by a lady by the name of Ayn. Well, it depends upon what school of thought you're from. I've always called her Ayn Rand, but it's Ayn, A-Y-N. Um, and I like it. I liked Atlas Shrugged for a number of reasons. It's a very secular book. I should say that. It's a very, um, it's, there's the depiction of the people. They're all professional and capable, and they just simply have no use at all for stupidity or uh, or people that are fake, anything like that. And I think that is a universal theme in the books that I really truly enjoy. I enjoy straightforwardness and people that figure things out, not that live in denial or the thing that'll drive me crazy is when you can figure out a plot line uh, before the author wants you to, because the people are just so dumb. And they 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 believe stupidity, they believe rumors, uh, they believe nonsense, then and they take things as fact without ever bothering to try and figure out if they are facts. Uh, that type of thing. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's obviously misdirection, and that is a great plot. That's a great plot planner. Misdirection is a great plot planner, but as a general rule, people who live by misdirection, and who actually, you know, make stuff up, uh, to sort of self-soothe. That is what kind of drives me crazy. Oh no, there's that symbol again. But apparently both. There's a couple of us that do that. This is I have. I don't think I have arthritis in my hand, but I do have a tendency to, when I'm balancing my hand, as I'm trying to hold back hold the page down or something like that, it'll oftentimes look like I'm flipping people off or, be making the flipping off sign. That is not what I'm doing. So please don't ever think that it is. It's just that I curl my finger under. Obviously, I'm holding onto the cap with my thumb and my forefinger, and the rest of my fingers are out there. And I have contracture in my last two fingers on both hands anyway, a little bit. So I don't know what they call that. I just call it getting old, and actually, it's part of it's a vitamin D. A part of what causes it is a vitamin D deficiency, and so if you're like me and you don't get out in the sunshine an awful lot, and I have run out of my supplements, it gets a little bit worse, but it's not, it can certainly be corrected. All you have to do is think about not curling your fingers under and actually hold them straighter out. So it's just a matter of getting, stretching them a little bit. All right, I am all tired of this brown at this point in time, and I still have 3 huge spaces to go. Fortunately, I do not make, I don't go for them all at this particular moment in time. It's just that it's so fussy to get in the little tiny spaces, and you're making the square, and then the chisel tip is too big, and the fine tip is too small, is really what it is. And what I need is like a tip that, like on a Crayola super tip, and to get in, to make larger swaths of color. I tried using the chisel tip, but it's too big, and the ink flows out of it too quickly, and I keep hitting those blues with the brown. So that's why I'm using this fine tip. And so we need I wonder if we could make a marker that looks like a tire jack or a tire iron, that's got 4 tips. Be interesting to hold, but wouldn't that be cool if we could have like a central well and then 4 tips on it, so that you could have a fine liner, a liner like this, a a Crayola. Oh, I know, a liner like this, a chisel tip, a Crayola super tip type size, and a brush tip. And oh, hey, pen makers, marker makers, here's an idea for you. Let's have one of those. It'll look like a tire iron, and it'll fit in your hand. It would probably be fine. Have it cross in the middle with a central inkwell and 4 tips. I vote yay. Of course, how would you store it? You have to create a special box for them, I guess, or a special type bag. Yeah, I guess you'd make it a round bag. Maybe you could do that. I don't know. Or a square bag. Have it open on the side so that you could see what colors there were. They couldn't be very big sets, because otherwise it would be huge. Send your marker set in the box the size of a computer or something, a desktop computer. That'd be pretty funny. But at any rate, so as I'm coloring along here, I'm looking at the blue and or green and the flowers, and I'm thinking, what can I do to zhuzh those up? And so when we get to the end, I do a fair, I don't do, but I actually do a fair amount. I'm getting a little punchy, guys. I do a fair amount of line work, of white Posca and glitter pen and all of that. So it'll be all duded out, so to speak. So I was over at Dee Dee's earlier today. It is, by the way, it is Wednesday at about 4:53 in the afternoon, and I started making this video yesterday. And so I was over there, and she was collaging a poster. And I thought, what a great idea. She used I guess Hobby Lobby had clearance on their posters. So there was, she got one of Big Ben that was normally $16.99, I think she said, and it was only $1.99, $1.79, something like that. 90% off is what it was, which is an amazing price. Now, I've never been in my local Hobby Lobby. I understand that it is a very nice store. Because it is some distance from me, although it is here in Virginia Beach. I also have a Jerry's Artorama. They are both in the same neighborhood, which is a neighborhood that I very rarely get to. Because you have to go some ways down the boulevard, and I rarely go down the boulevard. So, for those unfamiliar with the Virginia Beach area, there is a boulevard that runs all the way from the ocean front to Norfolk, basically, called Virginia Beach Boulevard, and it goes through the entire city, and it's, of course, Virginia Beach is huge as far as geographically. But at any rate, I've never been to my Hobby Lobby, but it looked like a really great idea for those of you who enjoy good collage. I have been collecting the sort of 8.5 by 11 inch, or actually I think they're slightly bigger. I think they're 9 by 12 mailers that all of the political candidates have been sending this year, and they're great stiff paper. I mean, for you can reuse them for recycling for arts and crafts. You can use them as page protectors, to stick behind your coloring pages if you're going to use markers or something like that. They're basically the same consistency as light cardstock, and so you can use them to to stiffen up. You double them up, and you could, if you do cloth books or something like that, you could use them to stiffen up the pages of your cloth books. All kinds of things. Just I'm a firm believer in recycling, so I have a stack of them. I just counted them because the mail came today, and there were like 5 or 6 more of all of the various candidates. And apparently there must have been a sale because they're all using this same size. And I think I have 42 of them now, which is a lot. That is a lot of campaign literature. And it's not really even literature. It's just, vote for me and don't vote for the other guy. But I think it's a great way to reuse stuff like that. So that actually makes me think. I've just played with the volume, so if the volume suddenly changed on you, that might be why. I noticed on playback that my voice was a little soft, and so I didn't realize that I had the volume set fairly low. Hopefully this improves it some. But it does bring to mind a question of what type of recycling do we all do? And I was thinking about coloring pages. And the reason why I thought of that is because one of the things that I was thinking that I would do with all of these bits of campaign cardboard that I've been getting is if I ever decide to get into journaling, I might do that with some of the coloring pages that I've done. Now, of course, I can send them away. I can give them as prizes. I can do that, but then I can also make other things out of them. And that was brought to mind by one of the ladies in my Facebook group showed a tray that she had made. She used one of the pages from a PDF that she'd bought, and she colored it, and then used it as the sort of central focal piece of a breakfast tray that she created for her mother. And then she printed off another copy and colored that in, and cut it up and used the rest of it for decoration around the edges. Anyway, it was all very creative, and she decoupaged it down, and then she varnished over it or shellacked over it, whatever, and it made this beautiful breakfast tray. And so that makes me wonder, what do all of you guys do with the coloring pages that you create? Do they just live in the books forever, or do you make something out of them? Like Shannon, my moderator and dear lady friend here in the YouTube world, made a beautiful sign for my channel, which is the sign that I use when I need to step away from the camera a little bit during live streams. And she did it by coloring in pages from my books and then collaging them onto this sign, and then did hand lettering, and the whole thing is just absolutely gorgeous. And then I've seen Anne over at A Colorful Life using the pages that she creates, or that she colors in, and collaging them into the journals that she's making. So what do you guys do with the coloring pages that you create? And leave me a comment and tell me. And I think that it would be great if you've got pictures and can post them to Instagram and tag me, or in my Facebook group. Please do so. I think that that is so interesting, and I really strongly encourage it. I mean, I was watching Dee Dee today, and at the end of her show, she was inking she's been doing Inktober, and she has been doing movie monsters. And so the creepier the movie monster, the better. And her artwork, of course, is just absolutely astounding. On Monday, she drew The Fly, and it's absolutely fabulous. But today she did the female doctor from Planet of the Apes. Cornelius was the man, and the doctor was played by Kim Hunter. I know that. But in the inking process, as she was drawing it, she gave her a That Girl flip, or a Mary Tyler Moore flip. If anybody is old enough to remember the original Mary Tyler Moore show or That Girl, both of them do the whole hat throw thing in Times Square in New York. And they both have a flip. It used to be called a flip, where the bottom edge of your hair curls. And so Dee Dee had done it sort of exaggerated on her drawing today, and so she just simply took a pair of scissors and gave her a haircut, and then glued the page down onto a fresh piece of paper and continued to draw. And I just thought, that it really just goes to show, waste not, want not, as far as your artwork goes. What a brilliant way to save something. She just basically fussy cut out the part of the hair she wanted to keep, and ditched the rest. But it really does, it really speaks volumes to the craftiness of the hobby of coloring, and all of the different things that you can, in fact, do. For instance, this one that I'm working on right now, there's tons of pieces in there that could be fussy cut out and used for other things. You could actually use parts of the white page as part of the design that you create for collage. And I really encourage that kind of thing. I love to see it, and because once these books leave my hands and go to the printers, they are there for you to create in, and so the more creative and imaginative the things that you can do with your original colorings, the happier that makes me, because that is really why I do this. I do this because I get a thrill every time I go online and I see one of you guys have colored something that I drew. I color it, because I am learning to color. And I do realize that I've been, for a while, I was so intent on only using my ink tints. And I realized that for the last few videos, I've been using pretty much only my markers. But I really do color with watercolors and markers and ink tints and pencils and ink and you name it. I have been trying to teach or learn from all of you, really, how to color with it. And, this particular thing that I'm doing, I really am sort of channeling my inner Kate and Zoe Archer and even to an extent Anne, doing the straight coloring with the markers and then embellishing. I just love the way that it turns out. And plus, it's a format that works well in a video because it's so much less time consuming. You can actually have the possibility of doing one in, granted, a 2 hour and some odd minute video, but nonetheless, I do actually finish this piece on air in this video, which is unusual for me because I usually have tons and tons of works in progress because I can never finish coloring anything while I'm on, especially when I'm doing a live show. So this is as much of a novelty for me to be able to actually finish a piece on air as it is for you, and as this is the first video of this length that I've made. So now here is an interesting thing, because remember before when I used that yellow ochre color, I had already laid down underneath it on those top ones up there a layer of the cream. And so you can see that the ochre is a strong enough color to where it doesn't, the fact that there's cream underneath the top ones, but not underneath those bottom ones, doesn't make a difference to the way that the paper shows the color. So I think that that is very interesting, that I like to understand the saturation properties of markers or ink tints or watercolors, things like that. What colors will change, what colors won't change. If you lay down a purple over a red, it becomes more of a magenta, that kind of thing. Or a deep wine, a deep burgundy, something like that. So learning how your colors work together is important. Speaking of working together, what is your favorite color combination? And I don't necessarily mean for coloring. I mean for, I don't know, like when you chose the curtain pattern for your house, or a particular bedspread that you love, and does it have specific colors that pleased your eye and that work together? And if so, tell me in the comments what they were, and we'll try and work them into a drawing or into a coloring and see how they look on a colored page. That's also another way for you to select color palettes when you're working on a particular project, is look around you, look at some of the prints that you've got throughout your homes, or in your own wardrobe, a skirt that you particularly love a floral print on, and use those colors, pull those colors and use them in your coloring. It's like having an instant color palette. The other thing that I do, of course, is when I'm trying to look for a color palette, I do find looking at finished pages, like on Instagram or on Facebook, that's hard for me. It's hard for me to pick out colors without wanting to do it exactly the same way that the colorist did. So I tend to look at fabric, printed fabric. The color palettes are usually fairly limited, but the reason why those colors were chosen was because they all work really well together. And you can make that, and pull that into your own coloring work if you like. I have a colorist in my Facebook group. Her name is Elizabeth Zach Siegel. And she is a master at a single color palette. So in other words, she'll choose green as her color and then change up the weights of the green that she's putting down. So she'll use light greens and dark greens and medium greens and make a single mono palette out of those. And the work is absolutely stunning. Her pages just never fail to get a ton of likes and a ton of praise. And it's amazing. She did one, and I think I mentioned this just recently. She did one, it's out of my mandalas book, and it's one of the square mandalas, the one that has all the gemstones in it. And she did that in black. And she weighted the black so that it looks like chrome. And it's just an amazing result. So, no matter what colors you choose, you can really, even if it's just a single color, you can really create an amazing result. And the only limit is your imagination. And, so this particular color palette came completely out of my imagination, but with that inspiration of seeing those really cool lights on Dancing with the Stars of all things. So, it just goes to show that inspiration can come from just about anywhere. It doesn't have to be nature. Coloring flowers doesn't always have to be from nature. It could be from, I don't know, you could particularly enjoy the colors in SpongeBob SquarePants and only use those and still come out with a fantastic result. Or look at Mickey Mouse. The primary color palettes that they used in that were just that. They were primary colors. They were red, black, blue, yellow, and white. And those were the colors that were in every single one of the Mickey Mouse cartoons. And yet they are as enjoyable today as they were, and because primary colors always work. So if you're stuck for a palette, grab your primary colors and go for it. There's nothing wrong with coloring something red, white, and blue. And it could be patriotic for a lot of different countries. Or red and yellow and black, which is the flag colors for, I believe, California and a lot of other different countries. So there's inspiration everywhere for a color palette. You just have to keep your eyes open and find it. And, all right, now I'm finally done with that central part. There's only the brown on that last bit to do. Thank goodness. And as I'm looking at this, I noticed that I kept some of the white highlights in those blue gemstones, and some I let go. I do end up putting all of those back with a white uniball. Not sure why I zoomed out here. I think I probably took a little break and I had paused the video, zoomed out, which is what I normally do. Or, I'll zoom back in a little bit. Or maybe I just wanted to gain a wider angle to be able to show you. Once again, I am, as I'm working on this, coloring those large spaces with that little, the fine tip is just so taxing. So I have finally decided that what I need to do is grab the chisel tip and just, try to do as much, excuse me. Ooh, sorry about that. Had to take a break to cough. And at any rate, I think what I was saying is I'm just trying to do as big a swath of space as I can before I finally go in with the little chisel tip and get the fine details in this. So I hope that you are enjoying this kind of video. Do let me know in the comments if you like this style of video with the voiceover, how you feel about, a full coloring of a page all in one sitting, that kind of thing. I can tell you that while this particular video is taking me quite a long time to do, it's because it's a learning process. It's the first time I've made one of this length, and it is certainly the first time that I've tried to do a start to finish in one video. Normally I break them up into smaller bite-sized pieces, and I know that some people do really enjoy the long video chat, color and chats, while other people enjoy the shorter ones. So I do try to mix up and make a bunch of different styles of videos for you so that there is something on my channel for everybody. I particularly love the style of video that Zucchini Kitty makes, that where she's coloring something and she shows you how she's going to do a particular section, but if it's repetitive, she'll go ahead and show you once or twice, and then she'll turn off the camera, do the rest of that particular section, and then come back and demonstrate the next part. Those are videos that I particularly like to watch the style of. They're shorter, and oftentimes I'm watching a video when I'm taking a break from something else. So, though that particular style works for me. But on the other hand, I also love, especially if I'm going to sit and color, I love to watch the big long videos that Anne makes and, laugh, and it's kind of like it really is like sitting at the kitchen table with a friend, and you get to be quiet while she does all the talking. So I'm perfectly happy to make whatever kind of videos everybody likes, and if you are not a fan of this super long video, well, then there's plenty of short ones for you to watch as well. I won't stop making that kind of video, but now that I can make videos of any length and not have it, take up all the rest of my computing power for the rest of the day, I will do so. I will make more and varied kinds of videos for you guys. After all, I only stream once a week, so and that is, I could stream more often, but the live streaming schedule is just so full, and it doesn't always fit into my schedule every single time. So, and it's hard for people to not stream over each other, and I don't want to have to force colorists to make a choice between watching me or watching, somebody else or something like that. That hardly seems worthy of why it is that you guys enjoy coloring videos on YouTube. So those people that love to chat have color and chats, and those people that just maybe love to color and visit might enjoy watching something more like this. So that's the beauty of YouTube. There is something here for every single colorist. and and artists. And I mean, I like, for instance, I watch a lot of the Curiosity Inc. Because I particularly enjoy Alex and his family, and listening and watching the projects that he takes on. I also love Fiona Art. I still watch Fiona Art at least 3 or 4 videos a week. I watch Pour Your Heart Out, which is uh, a channel out of, I believe that she is from Australia. She's an acrylic pour artist. I also watch another one, Sarah Mack, who creates really different and unique acrylic pours. Of course, so does Fiona Art. Fiona does flowers. Um, but I also enjoy the Crazy Lamp Lady. And I love to, she basically goes thrift shopping for profit, and haunts the Goodwills and the thrift stores, and uh, finds things at a bargain price and then resells them for a profit, and everybody wins. She is able to earn enough money to make a living, and the thrift stores sell the items, get to sell the items, and they make their money. In the meantime, I'm learning a ton about what stuff is worth, and uh, you know, what things are being collected today versus when I was young. And, like, for instance, it used to be that everybody was really enamored of crystal and china, and hardly anybody wants crystal or china anymore. Most all of the women that I know have inherited tons of that stuff. And how many of us actually have dinner parties or use crystal and china every day? If we have kids, we're using stuff that doesn't break, um, or much less expensive, more functional, and above all, dishwasher safe. Because I tell you what, every single china plate that I have has got that gold edge on it, and you cannot put it anywhere near a dishwasher, or or you will wash that oftentimes 14 karat gold leaf right off the edges, and you don't want to do that, because that's, but on the other hand, hand washing all that stuff is a pain. So, and when I was growing up, the big collectible for older women was, or older people, was Hummels, and or Dresden china, or the figurines. Heck, people collected the the plush toys. I know they have a name, but I don't remember what they are. But they were made by the company Thai. And now, of course, you can give those things away because hardly anybody collects them anymore. So, and then, of course, you juxtapose that with a channel like Curiosity Inc., which has all of the really old collectibles. Um, you know, uh, well, I never think of Hot Wheels as being particularly collectible because they were just a boy's toy when I was a kid. But and I think that little kids still love um, Hot Wheels. But the old ones, the vintage ones, are worth a lot of money. And remember when the boys collected uh, comic books and baseball cards and all of those types of things. And, all of that stuff is collectible now to the right person, but that pool of people that collect it is getting progressively smaller. So, and then of course, the person who collects it passes away and the heirs don't want it, so it ends up at either for sale somewhere, or heaven forbid, back in a thrift store. Um, And, you know, the whole collectible cycle starts all over again. Somebody gets a bargain and somebody else, you know, gets a little profit out of it. And the next thing you know, it's back in the hands of a real collector that perhaps paid a premium price for it. So it all just keeps going around. I can't believe I haven't run out of things to talk about yet. It feels like I'm talking a mile a minute, just trying to keep up with, you know, with the action here on the screen. Now, I did decide to go with the turquoise green on this frame. And in the embellishments part of this, I do talk about, I don't actually embellish the frame, but the jury is still out on that. So while I don't do it here in the video, as I'm sitting here looking at the original, I didn't want to take away from the central part of it, so I may not do anything with it, but then again, I may before the, you know, before I close the book on this particular one. The more I look at this particular finish, the happier I get with it, especially as I'm watching this playback and watching how it's coming together. So once again, fighting that, you know, I want the big swaths of color, but using a chisel tip in those. I think I've just finally gotten tired of capping and uncapping the little end as I've been going along here. And I do manage to get off the screen here a little bit, and I do apologize for that. All you're really missing is just straight coloring, and I think I'm going to color in the box that darker blue. I just wanted to give the corners of these boxes a little something different, and I'm about to realize, of course, that I'm off screen. It's like, oh no, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go. Is it ever going to get done? Yeah, see, I am actually really liking this. The more I look at it, the more I'm liking it. And that is, I think, what I'm saying as I'm coloring along here. Once again, I did talk all the way through this video, but I was just so boring that I thought I would just I had to voice over and maybe not be quite so boring. So when you're boring yourself, it's never a good sign. Come on, Christine. Almost there, almost there. I do, at the end of this, I do switch to real voice. So you know, we aren't going to get all the way to the end with me voicing over it. So it is a new day here. Excuse me, in the studio. It is 5:47 a.m. now. So roughly 12 hours after the last time check. I did get a nice solid 8 hours of sleep, so I burned out yesterday afternoon fairly early. And so I spent the morning actually following back and trying to figure out. I noticed once again that my voice had the audio recording. Actually, if you would comment on that and let me know if the volume on this was okay for you. Were you able to, I mean, did you have to turn it down? Were you unable to hear it? That kind of thing. It's still an experiment. I'm still working with the levels, and I don't have a particularly dedicated microphone. I use the microphone that is attached to my video camera. And it's not, I mean, it's obviously not a Blue Yeti. But I looked at Blue Yetis, and Blue Yetis are expensive. And I'm out of sugar. So about the last thing in the world I can do is afford to buy a Blue Yeti. Speaking of which, please buy books. And that's all I'll say on that. Starving artist, headed way, we're way past the holidays. All the holiday money is gone now, so things are once again lean, and we're headed into winter. So buy books. Buy all the artist books. People are, I notice that a lot of art is being released, and I think that's terrific. And even our dear queen of coloring, the reigning queen, who will always be the queen, Joanna Basford. I love, absolutely love that she has put out the Inky Worlds video. Okay, it's our class and book, so that all of you guys can teach yourselves to draw. And I highly recommend it. Absolutely highly recommend it. I think it is a great it's a great thing. If you've got talent for it and imagination, go for it. Okay, I think there's one more square to color, and that we're going to switch now to real voice time. Just in the nick of time because I'm about out of voice. And I am back with you live voice. I brush into my first foray. Hope you enjoyed Jane Eyre. All right, now, I was not convinced about this color palette as I was working on this. I think I probably said that probably more than once, but I'm actually kind of liking it now. I do believe that it needs some zhuzhing up, so let's set about doing that. I think I'm going to start with just making sure that my highlights are in my gemstones the way I want them to be. See if we can get this pen rolling. And it's been a long time since I've done one of these in one sitting like that. And this is a long video, guys. I don't know whether or not to say Yahoo or I'm sorry. I'm channeling my inner Kate. Kate at Kate's Coloring Haven, I believe, is able to do videos in one sitting, or, full colorings. Add a little interest there. I think maybe I'll add some white lines on these as I spin the book. I apologize that I'm doing that. I want to make sure I keep them all on the same side. That's hard. That's hard to do when you're I like to spin the book. And let's see here. I'll do this one. Too far to the inside. 6 and 7, 8. I'm doing contortions here, back and forth. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. This was actually fun to color. 5, 6, 7. Oops. Trying to keep my hand out of it while it's wet. 8. And then maybe some, let's see here, some little ones going, get rid of these. These are always the touches that I love. We'll start up here, I guess. And go 1, whoops. Just add a little bling to each one of these. I'll roll the book so I can stay off the wet, because this is a Uniball white gel pen. Oops. Got a little hinky with that one. Only you and I know it's there, though. Right? Only you and I know that I messed that one up. How about I stop going back and forth and just go one direction? And one more. The details really bring it to life. It's one of the things I love most about straight coloring is that you can then bling it out with white or metallics or really anything that you want. Now these big green centers got lost, so we'll add a little white gel pen in there to sort of bring those back, because they sort of blend in with the rest of the flower, even though they are a different color. Let's zoom you down here. So I hope you enjoyed watching me color this and that you colored along with me. I will be posting this to Instagram soon. I think just 3 little dots in the centers of these is probably more than plenty to sort of mark them out. And see, I used the dark blue up there and I didn't really like it, so I switched to the lighter green. I used the, I used the cerulean blue in the center of this one, but I think it's not what I wanted, so I switched to the turquoise green in the center of this one. And I like this one a little bit better. Okay, I think that might be enough for the whites. And maybe we'll add a little. Just a little white to those down there. And again to these up here. These little details really do make all the difference in the world. And then maybe maybe a little bit of gold. Start out small and just do maybe a little bit of gold on each side of these petals. I don't want to bling it out, you know, in poor taste. Maybe a little one up here in the, maybe 3. Maybe we'll do 3 up here in the corners. These are the Pentel Hybrid glitter gel pens that Kenny sent, and they are just fabulous. I love them. So thank you, Kenny. Every time I use these, I think of you. Ooh, and how about maybe 3 little dots in these. You know, I'm all about the symmetry. And maybe some little dots. Make them a little more round. Kind of following along a couple of these up here. Put one out there. Maybe one down there. Yeah, that'll work. Whoops, sorry. You can't see that, can you? Ay, ay, ay. Sorry about that, guys. Well, you're not guys, but you know what I mean, right? Yeah, I like that. My voice is a little burned out now. And I actually got to download a new piece of software called Audacity to do the voiceover. So, and then I had to learn to use it. So, this coloring came with a lesson for me as well. Okay, let's see. Yeah, well, let's add just a little bit of bling to maybe 2. Maybe we'll just go 2. Maybe 3 around these little ones. That'll work. Okay. What did I say? 3 around these little ones. And then 2 up the sides. See what I mean about my sleeve? Oh, actually you can't see that, but my sleeve gets caught in the on the edges of the paper. Okay, and couple up the sides. Whoops. Keep your hands out of the wet ink, Christine. Okay, and some little dots. Okay, so we got those, we got the centers. Okay, so now we have, we'll do these. Concentrating on the little details. Sorry, I'm not talking. Okay, how did I do? These were considerably shorter in the, or were they on the other side? No, they weren't. Okay, okay, I didn't take them down that far. Okay, so they only went from here. Okay, got it. And I just want one on the other side. All right. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So we'll go from about here, around. Starting to burn out just a little bit, so I'm glad that we're reaching the end of this project. Like I said, it's been a long time since I sat and colored something from start to finish in one sitting. Normally I have it, if I'm working on a video, I'm coloring on it over a period of days. But I really did this one all in one sitting, so okay. And I do believe that other than adding a little bit, I need to add something up there in the corners. What should I add in the corners? Well, let's see here. Maybe I will add just, how about 4 little gold nails. Just add 4 little gold nails up there onto my, yeah. And I could scroll a design into the frame, but I don't want to take away from the, I think that would be too busy. At this point, I think it would be gilding the lily. Okay, now I will tell you share my tip. I always clean my gel pens off before I recap them for storage, and I find that if I do that, they're not clogged the next time I go to use them. So that's just a little hint or tip from me to you. And this is the finished project for today, all blinged out. And what do you think? Now, I got to looking at this, and it is essentially almost the same color palette that I used sort of on this one. Well, maybe not. Other than the turquoise, but yeah, it's pretty close. Apparently I like those colors. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and will consider purchasing one or more or all. There are lots of people out there who have them all of my books, and will, in fact, until we meet again, be coloring something pretty. Thank you for joining me, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Bye. And don't forget that there are links to everything in the description below. Once again, bye.